Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Print to Pixel. I'm joined today by Eliza Slone, who's the Vice President of Strategy at MKDM. It's an agency that focuses in the nonprofit world. For over 18 years, Eliza Slone has been helping nonprofit organizations inspire donors and create change, from building iconic places like the High Line in New York and the Statue of Liberty Museum, to telling stories of veterans and immigrants, to protecting our civil rights. Welcome, Eliza.
Hi, Dennis. Thanks so much for having me here. It's great to be on your podcast.
Yeah, super excited to have you on today. For those who don't know you, Eliza, I'd love to start maybe with your background. Tell us the story of Eliza and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, like so many people, I had a direct marketer show up on my career day at school, thought, mail and email, that's where I want to head. No, absolutely not. I was an English major, right? I did a lot of science. I was looking for a job because we need jobs when we graduate from college so we can make money, so we can live at home. And I responded to a digital classified because it was 2006 for this job at MKDM. 18 years later, I am still here. My joke this year has been that my career at this point potentially might last longer than Twitter. Jack Dorsey sent the first tweet in March 2006, and I started a few months after that. So a few months more, I think I got it. And I think that background of being involved both in science and English was weirdly the perfect preparation. I think that analytical side was always deeply satisfied by my geology and biology classes, but I always loved writing as well. And I think marketing is what prepares you for that. In terms of the nonprofit space, I'd actually volunteered at a land trust when I was in college, right? So working, I think I was doing something like database entry, right? Because of course, like what else does the intern do in a spreadsheet, obviously? And I was sort of interested in that, but didn't really know how to find it as a career, and weirdly found this job. I was probably one of those kids who thought, maybe working a couple of years and then I'll go back to law school. A couple of years after I was started working was 2008, which we all know was a financial crisis, right? And lawyers were in copious supply, and it didn't really make sense to go out and get that $100,000 degree. So there are a lot of the practical considerations that we all come up with in terms of our career and where we want to go. But there's so much more beyond that. I think you referenced a couple of those things in my introduction, and thank you for that. But it's those accomplishments, right? I got to stand on the High Line before it was open. It was a construction site. It was cold and windy and horrible, and we didn't want to be up there for too long. But we could look down and see the Statue of Liberty and the harbor. We had a sense of what this place would be. We were walking, on big sheets of metal that were just laid down at the time. A few years after that, getting to open the Statue of Liberty Museum, having all of these experiences. So the work on a day-to-day level is incredibly engaging from the writing perspective, from the data perspective, from the analytics perspective. But then I think there are places, and I have children. I have a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old, so 2 little ones. They're not going very far yet, but being able to think I'm going to be able to take them to these places and explain that, I saw it when, and I got to help building that.
How cool is that?
It's really cool. They're little terrors right now, so we're not traveling anywhere yet. Later, I can't imagine trying to get them around the city. But pretty
these
standard.
These are things that will be there for generations, and the fact that you've had the opportunity to contribute to the creation of them and their success is really something. It sounds like you're kind of like the marketing unicorn with the English background, the scientific English major. There's not that many of them out there.
No, there aren't. And I went to a sort of classic liberal arts college, right? So we didn't have technical programs. They didn't want to train you in anything. We didn't have a marketing degree, right? Because it was very classic liberal arts, which I loved. It was a great experience. But weirdly, it was the marketing degree that I got and didn't realize it just via, Shakespeare and hydrology. The math and hydrology got a little hard, but it's very hard. Anyone who's done some geo. Yeah, I think the other thing beyond that has been the technological advancement. I mentioned the start of Twitter. Yeah, it was YouTube was early on. Like these channels didn't exist. I haven't looked up, when Giving Tuesday started, but that was after my career. I remember, you know, initially being like, oh yeah, we got to do something with this Giving Tuesday thing. What is this nonsense, right? And now it's been so core to all of our programs. The evolution in face to face. We've seen channels kind of go away and come back, right? I don't know, Dennis, what your experience has been with telemarketing, right? But I think telemarketing was the channel that everyone was into for a while. It faded, and now there's been such a resurgence of telemarketing in the last couple of years. I've really heard of that moving the dial as well. So just the tools that are now available to us have been really fascinating and kept it very interesting.
Absolutely, yeah. I want to bookmark that and come back to it. But before we go there, I'd love to learn more about MKDM, where you've invested your career, and for somebody to put in the number of years that you have, it must be a great place to work. Would love to hear more about the company, what its mission is, how it serves the nonprofit marketplace, and then how your role has evolved there.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, our goal is to inspire donors and motivate action, right? And so it comes down to that. We are channel agnostic, whatever channels allow you to do that and empower your donors. One of the things that I think is really special about us is just our ability to really embed in your organization and feel like an extension of your development office. I think that's when we're really strongest, is when we have those firm partnerships. Um, our average client tenure is, just wild. And I think it's because of the strength of those relationships we've built and the success we brought to the programs, honestly. A lot of our client relationships are 10 plus years at this point, because we are most effective when it is a we, not an us and a you. I know there's some agencies I'll hear say, oh, yeah, the client this, the client that. And I think I always a little bit forget that. And I'll say, yeah, at Rails to Trails, we're building this trail across the country. But you know, that's what it's about, right? At a nonprofit, you're enabling your donors to achieve their mission. It's not your mission, it's their mission. And I think that's the way it's always felt for me is I'm helping our nonprofits achieve their missions. It's about their work and what they're able to do. So whether that means mail, whether that means digital ads, whether that means email, whether that means face to face, will help you succeed in that way. We just have fantastic leadership. Maura Kavanaugh was our president. She was for a very long time the DMFA's youngest president for a while during her term. She's very very proud of that until she was displaced. But really, just I think a great marketer, a great nonprofit thinker, and a really great mentor to me who's allowed me the space to grow up and the encouragement to pursue some of these opportunities and now sort of help us move forward as an agency, which is fantastic. I think, one of the things we're going to talk about in a little bit is what we're seeing in terms of the challenges of working in the nonprofit space. And there are two challenges that people cite as the reasons that they leave the industry, and that is a lack of adequate compensation and benefits, and it's a lack of path to advancement. And I think we've always really prioritized those two things for all of our staff members. And we're really proud to do that because in addition to our client retention, our employee retention has just been huge as well. So we're reconsidering as everyone grows up in their careers and matures how we continue to do that and keep it interesting, because we all need that, right?
Well, it sounds like you've had incredible projects to work on, and you've been able to work for an incredible leader, and so it's not a surprise then that you would hang around and grow and prosper at a place like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tremendous. That's great. Um, and you mentioned some of the changes that have happened in the marketing channels that are used by MKDM. Um, and so since 2006, there's been such a shift in the way that technology has impacted the way that nonprofits present themselves and appeal to their donors. Uh, Talk a little bit about that evolution and some of the things that you're seeing now, so sort of current trends that you think nonprofit fundraisers and marketers should, have in mind as they're thinking about their plans for 2025?
Yeah. I'm, you know, it's an interesting time, and I think it's a challenging time and a hard time. I don't know if this is one of the trends that's been coming up. I'd love to say like, oh, you should definitely be thinking about, P2P tax, right? That's where it's at. Everybody's raising money there. I think the industry trends are telling us that we are increasingly struggling when it comes to raising money anywhere, right? It's all becoming harder. We all had this lovely period of 2, 3, 4 years where generosity was increasing during the pandemic. Those trends are reversing. It's becoming harder. I think nonprofits can still do it, but we know that the size of the donor universe is declining, right? So our trend has to be, how do we reverse that? How do we increase generosity? How do we meet people where they are and bring them to us? Um, there were, I've been fresh off bridge, so I'm thinking of that, and I think it is not branding that makes money. There was plenty of data who said that we have to solicit people in order to raise money, but we need to have a large enough presence that people recognize us and that is valuable. And how are we communicating that mission with specificity? Um, how do we distinguish ourselves and make sure we're sticky and interesting and the thing that people remember? Because it's so hard to do that, especially when we all have limited budgets. We can all invest in some more digital fundraising. We could all do some additional, retargeting mailings, I think, are a great tool as well. There's so much available to us, but can we make sure that we've got a message that is going to stick with people if they get 1, 2, 3, 4 brand impressions? And I think to some degree, personality matters. And a lot of times as nonprofits, we're a little afraid to go in that direction, to be distinct, to have a voice. And I think that seems increasingly important in this world of just fractured attention to me.
Sure.
I don't know. Dennis, what do you think? What are you saying?
I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense. A couple of uh, different thoughts come to mind. First, the economic news of this week um, has, I think, highlighted what perhaps some of us have been feeling for the last few months, that the underpinnings of the economy are getting weaker, right? And so people are
Mm-hmm.
starting to pull back. People are starting to, think about what their outflows are from a money standpoint and be more selective. And
Mm-hmm.
so I love the fact that you turn to brand. I think that a lot of our marketing has become uh, very, very performance based, right, and very transactional,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so those things can never go away, right? They are now rightly a part of the mix, but they are not the mix. And at the end of the day, the most valuable thing you can build is a brand, and
Absolutely.
so and the most powerful brands are able to um, tell stories and to leave very strong impressions on the mind of their audience.
Yeah.
And so I think you're very wise in thinking that that in order to thrive in this coming world that we have over the next few years, that you do need to invest in brand. And brand is a long-term investment. It's not easy. And so, but you need to think about it as a part of the mix. And you need to think about the voice. You need to think about how to grow the audience of people who are attracted to that specific voice. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you don't want to just fall into the great unwashed, you know, uh, set of appeals that everybody gets. You have to find a way to stand out, and
Yeah.
and so I think that's spot on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it relates to emotion, right? Your brand has to evoke an emotion to be memorable. And they think that, this is very short term, but we're also in this Olympic moment, right? And we see all of these folks who all of a sudden have captured our hearts and our attention with the simple story that they're telling, right? So, how do we, and I think this is the other challenge for nonprofits, is how do we simplify our story and how do we get everyone to be okay with that, right? We need to tell a short, catchy, memorable, emotional story. And so often we want to say, but then we're also doing this, and then the impact on policymakers is that, and you have to understand this whole universe, right? Which, yes, you do. Some people do, but not everybody does, right? So let's get to that core simple story.
Not
Commit
everybody's a
to it.
nerd, wants to dive into all the details, right?
Yeah. Yes, save that for your major funders, save that for your grantors, save that for governments. They love that, right? Give that to the governments. But for my direct mail audience, for my email audience, they're not bored of that message you've put out. We're just trying to get them to remember it. Like, we're all bored of it, right? We've all said, these 4 words a million times, but we have to understand we're not them and repeat that thing that resonates and will touch them. So I'm hoping that'll carry us through this kind of challenging moment we're in. I think the election is another element too. I don't know what you're hearing and thinking about that, or if you do any work in this space. I think most of the strongest data we've seen suggests that the election is not going to be incredibly problematic for nonprofits. We've continued to fundraise well. Generosity to nonprofits far outstrips giving to political causes, even in election years. And there's even some data that I've seen that suggests that response rates tend to go up a little bit in acquisition because people are in a giving spirit. But this still feels like an unprecedented moment in an unprecedented time. And I just wonder how much prior elections there any prediction of what we're going to see this fall.
Yeah, yeah. Many people have died on the throne of trying to predict an election, and I'm certainly not going to be that person. We've got a pretty wild 100 days ahead of us, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, uh, uh, Eliza, you mentioned the Bridge Conference, which was last week. And for those who are unaware, the Bridge Conference is an annual event. It's held outside of Washington, D.C., that brings together a lot of the thought leaders in the nonprofit and fundraising space. Postalytics has been a sponsor. This is for several years. I wasn't able to go this year, but have been in the past. It's a tremendous get together. Um, uh, uh, and you were on a panel at the conference. Um, I heard about the panel. We discussed it briefly. Tell the audience what the panel was about and the unique format of the panel. And I think the nonprofit audience listening or watching will find this very interesting.
Yeah, it was an interesting one for me. I mentioned I have a strong data background. My title is Vice President Strategy, right? So we always have to be strategist and analytical. But so this is very out of my comfort zone. It doesn't have the graphs and charts, but I put this session together with Amy Bobrick of AB Data and Cassie Marcano of Reach Out and Read, because we wanted to have an offering that was meant to guide people into how to advance in their nonprofit career. I don't know, it feels a question that's very much as of the moment. I think during the pandemic, a lot of us were sort of buckled down and hibernating and surviving and making it through. And now for me, and I think some others of us have had this experience over the last couple of years, is this like moment of reemerging and thinking about what we want and what we need and how we're moving forward in a more strategic way instead of just surviving, right? So in that context, we wanted to do something about career development, professional development, and because I wanted to entertain myself almost, I decided to do it in a question and answer format. So it's an advice column about how to throw questions at us and have us answer how we would handle with whatever work problem you're facing. We got some in advance, but we had a job form where people could submit anonymously to us, so they could be as honest as they wanted to be. And then we had some prepared that we had gotten beforehand. And then we had some that were just thrown at us during the session. And it was super fun. We got far more questions than we anticipated. We're going to be doing some follow-up emails. We're going to be posting some of the questions on LinkedIn over the next couple of weeks and months just to get some audience feedback on the session. Um, I think some of the data about what we're seeing in the nonprofit space is really pretty stark. There's data that suggests that 45% of folks in the nonprofit space will move their jobs in the next 5 years, and half of them will leave the industry. And those turnover rates are worse than what you see in other industries. That's obviously program and fundraising combined, but that's a real issue. I think, Dennis, I don't know if you've run across this with your clients, but we have it happen not infrequently where someone will say, oh, that project is on hold until XYZ gets hired, or we can't proceed with this until we have our new mid-level person in place. And it really is affecting how people can raise money and advance in the sector. So obviously leadership has a responsibility to deal with that, to create a climate where people have adequate benefits, adequate compensation, and path to growth, because that's what keeps people in the role. But in the meantime, while you're surviving, we wanted to answer some of these questions. And I think I'm hoping the answers were helpful for people, but I think what was probably equally helpful is that the questions all resonated, I think, with everyone in that room. So having the sense that the thing that you're struggling with is also something that everyone is also struggling with. One of the ones that came up in a couple different ways is just those interdepartmental relationships and how tricky they can be, whether that's between your major gift department and your annual fund office, both wanting to take credit for the same donation. And there's a tug of war over that. Whether it's a conflict between a fundraising department and a communications department, both of which who want to be sending a specific narrative about the organization, or even between program and development in general, right? We had somebody write in to say that they didn't have a huge amount of faith in their programming department and didn't feel like their programs were necessarily delivering on the mission, and asked how they as a fundraiser could handle that, which seems like a pretty tricky situation. That one we had a little bit of a debate on how to answer that. I think there were some of us who were like, well, ethically, maybe you actually can't be in that space anymore. Maybe that's not actually somebody you can raise money for if you feel like you're not delivering the donor money and it's not being used the way that you hope it would be. On the other hand, if there's a commitment to the mission and they just need a moment to get organized and you still believe in the mission, maybe there's a way that that's still a place that you can be faithfully. So some of them are tricky and they didn't really have resolutions, but I think that sense of cross-department communication was really a theme that we saw emerging from it, for sure.
Interesting. It sounds as though there's some cultural things that need to be thought through from a leadership standpoint, and that some of the team members out there feel as though they're not being properly understood or recognized.
Yeah, absolutely. There was another really interesting question we got that was about what to do when your leadership doesn't believe you that your revenue numbers are going to be down, right? Which is a very hard position to be in.
Yeah.
We heard that from somebody that they had been reporting out that, we're not hitting our targets. We're not as close to goals we want to be. And they just won't accept those facts, right? Exactly, right? And so, I think our advice to them was like early, often, frequent reporting, as much reporting as they need, right? All the time, send them the industry reports, send them analysis. I think there's some element of magical thinking sometimes with fundraising where people are like, but we just haven't had Giving Tuesday yet. We haven't had year end. It'll all be fine, right? And we can't ignore those trends, and you can't let leadership do it either. I think, and then eventually it's important to have documentation. 9 months from now, you want to show them that 6 months before that, you told them you were going to be down, which is not the conversation you want to be in. But if it gets there, having record of that email may be helpful to you. So
absolutely.
Lots of challenges of overwork, of burnout. I'm sure that that's something that you've heard come up quite a bit, particularly as some of these channels are increasingly difficult to manage.
Yeah, no doubt. As Postalytics is a solution that nonprofits will bring in when they're hoping to ease the burden of workflow and integration. And so, direct mail has traditionally been a strong performer in the nonprofit space for fundraising and for a variety of purposes. But it is a hard channel to execute on, and so requires a lot of work, a lot of moving parts, a lot of project management. And so Postalytics is really designed to help solve those problems. And so we're often brought into nonprofits that are feeling those pain points. And
Mhm.
so we definitely we hear that a lot from the nonprofit world because that's kind of our entry point often into the conversation. So um,
Yeah.
I'm curious, Eliza, did you have any questions that came up in the advice column that felt were a little bit juicy, or would make people squirm a little bit?
Let's see. I feel like the one about not having confidence in the program side was probably the juiciest. I think that person said, quote, leaders on the program side don't seem to be moving the mission forward or have a plan. And I think when that line was read out loud in the room, there was a bit of a, ooh. uh, yes. Oh, here's another donut. So the other one that I think was kind of compelling was, so this person gave us a good name. Their name that they wrote in under was always faking the feeling. And they said, I fell into the field, but my organization is constantly pushing the idea that everyone works there because they deeply care about the cause and we're a family. Yes, it's a good cause, but it's also a job. Why can't we accept the idea that people work somewhere there because they're good at what they do and the job is a good one? So I think that was a pretty funny one. And I think, we talked earlier about how I got started, right? And so many of us did fall into it. So we talked about the need to relate to the mission and how important that may or may not be to you. I think, one of the things that we sometimes see is when you see that language about it's all about the cause or family, those can be excuses for inadequate compensation and not actually being a good job. So that would be something I would say is that a red flag for that. This person says it's a good job. So great, fine. If you need to pretend occasionally, if you need to say at the meetings like, oh, I really love the way that I'm able to dig into this data as your explanation for why you're there, and you can just sort of gloss over it. I bet they're not the only person who's like slightly pretending about the depth of commitment to the mission, though, in that case.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point about the remark around family, and you hear that a lot, even outside the nonprofit world. Like, this business is a family. Well, it's not really family. No, it's a
Right.
business, and it has a job, it has a mission, and we're all here to contribute to that. But it's not family, and to conflate the two is a bit presumptuous, and perhaps, as you say, is an attempt to gloss over some of the things that maybe make the job not all that attractive. So,
Yeah, yeah.
great point.
I will say, like on the reverse, and this may come out of everyone sort of renegotiating their relationship between work and what's personal, right? As we're all like increasingly working from home. There are also occasionally employees who, seek so much fulfillment at work that I think it's all of our responsibilities to like find that balance. Like,
Mhm.
we all love the people we work with. We're all friends with them, but it's not the same, right? And that still is a different relationship. So I think making sure that even while we're working at home, we're all cultivating things like external to work and not having too much of our ego tied up in only what we do, right? Because we're all complete people. So can we
Yeah.
keep that balance? I think one of the things that we did that was really funny is we all had our professional headshots right for the opening of this, and then we all shared a completely personal photo for our introduction, right, for that reminder of like we're all whole human beings and we bring all that to work, but we also need to take it home. So
Very cool. Very cool. Uh, uh, we may need to start referring to you as Dear Eliza moving forward after this event.
doesn't everyone love an advice column, right? I think it's just the most fun. And you never really answered. I'm never really actually that interested in the answers, right? I just want the questions. I just want the gossip. But yeah, coming to you on LinkedIn, hopefully, if I can carve out a little bit of time to get it done, look for it. I'm Eliza Slone, Slone on LinkedIn. So
Awesome. Awesome. Well, dear Eliza Slone, it's been wonderful to have you here today. Our audience can find you on LinkedIn, can find MKDM on the internet, I'm sure.
on the internet, we are mkdmc.com, weirdly, but you could find us there. Also, we are on LinkedIn, Facebook, currently maintaining a presence on Twitter, although we may be renegotiating that. So
Yeah, yeah. I was speaking on a panel last week, and we were talking about the former Twitter, now X, and I blurted out, "Well, you could tweet," and then I thought, "Well, can you X? Can you use X as a verb? I don't know."
it's so awkward. Everything about it is so awkward, right? And just my discomfort with that leadership, is just increasingly so.
Exactly. Well, Eliza, it's been great having you on today. I know the audience will love hearing your story, learning about the mission at MKDM and the great work that you've done. And we'll look forward to seeing more advice column activity on LinkedIn and hopefully at future conferences. So thank you so much.
Maybe.
And I hope that you have a great remainder of the year at MKDM.
Thank you so much, Dennis. This was incredibly fun.